Good morning, everybody. I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting today on the territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. My Haida name is Launis. My English name is Tamara Davidson, and I'm so honored to be here today as the Minister of Environment and Parks. I will be your MC for today, and yesterday I had the honor of presenting at the Major Projects Plenary. For millennia, Indigenous people have been stewards of the water, land, wildlife, and rich resources at the heart of what we now call British Columbia. I continue to renew my own love and connection to the land that often fills me with wonder. We have been stewards of our own lands and waters for time immemorial. To talk more about the importance of BC's coast, I'm pleased to welcome Premier David Eby.
Thanks, Tamara. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you here early this morning. We're joined by a number of our friends from coastal First Nations behind me. I see a number of my colleagues from the legislature here this morning. It's great to see you, colleagues. All of us are gathered here for the same reason. It's to celebrate the amazing and incredible northern coast of British Columbia. This is a coastline. If you've never had the opportunity to visit, I really encourage you to do so. It is a gem for the entire nation. It is a signature landscape and oceanscape that people think of when they think of British Columbia and when they think of our country as a whole. And not only is it beautiful and wild and incredible, but what often gets lost in the conversation about the North Coast is the incredible economic driver that it is for communities up and down its length. Whether you're talking about larger communities like Prince Rupert or smaller communities like Bella Bella, Bella Coola, tourism, fisheries, industries that have developed in a sustainable way along the coast through careful planning and work by multiple levels of government now reflect thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in economic activity every year. Now, if you've had a chance to visit a place like Cape Scott or one of the Bellas, Bella Coola, Bella Bella, it might feel a little crass to talk about economic activity in what is such a special and magical place. But it's important that we talk about it because that is the conversation that's happening right now across the country. How do we grow and strengthen our economy? How do we stand up on our own 2 feet as Canadians? How do we advance an economy that is distinctly and uniquely Canadian? And I can't think of a better example than the work that we've done in the Great Bear Rainforest. Here's a situation where we invested $60 million as a provincial government and now see $1.8 billion in economic activity that we're continuing with our commitments around the Great Bear Sea project. When you think about salmon, when you think about the fish, the seafood, the tourism opportunities, you can see how these numbers add up so quickly. It means that whether you're strictly focused on the numbers or whether for you nature is paramount, we can all agree that protecting our coast is not a threat to the Canadian economy. It is in fact a strategy for the Canadian economy. The oil tanker ban off the coast of British Columbia has been in place for generations, for more than 50 years. This is a consensus that has lasted across multiple governments. When it was encoded into law recently, that was not a new thing. That was putting into Canada's legal code something that had been the practice for decades. This oil tanker exclusion zone recognizes the obvious, that one crude oil spill would destroy billions of dollars in economic activity, would destroy the livelihoods of thousands of people and families up and down the coast, and there is no technology, there is no ability to clean up that spill. So when we think about what we have, the incredible gift as British Columbians and Canadians that the North Coast represents, both economically and just as a symbol of who we are as Canadian people, and you think about the opportunities still to come. We've only gotten started in terms of the opportunities along the North Coast. Putting it at risk to get rid of the oil tanker ban makes absolutely no sense, either economically or for the country. I also want to be clear about something. Coastal First Nations are standing with us here today, continue to be the drivers of economic activity in British Columbia and for the country as a whole. We may not always agree on everything, but one thing we do agree is that the oil tanker ban enables us to do major economic work together. It is not a surprise to me that 40% of the major projects in the federal government's shovel-ready major projects office right now are located in BC's Northwest. We require the ability to cooperate and work together and navigate responsible economic growth that benefits everybody and sustains livelihoods that have existed since time immemorial. We're going to be signing a declaration today calling on the federal government to stand up against those voices who would have us walk away from this multi-generational commitment. This is not, in my opinion, a partisan issue. Conservative leaders like Brian Mulroney, Ronald Reagan, they recognized that some places were too precious to put at risk, and that includes our North Coast. So we call on the federal government to recognize what generations of leaders have, that we need to protect our coast in order to grow our economy. And the conversation that we can have as a country between each other, the provinces and the territories, can be that distinctly Canadian approach of protecting the things that are precious for future generations, while growing the economy, creating opportunity for many people to come. And it's the people behind me, and it's the people of British Columbia and Canada who will make that happen. So thank you very much for joining us here this morning. I stand here, it's an honor to stand here with the Coastal First Nations and recognize your leadership in standing up for the tanker ban that has existed for decades, that exists for many more decades, and we will all push together to ensure that that opportunity is preserved for generations to come. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Premier Eby. I'd now like to introduce and welcome Chief Marilyn Slett, President of the Coastal First Nations.
Good morning. My name is Kawajit Marilyn Slett, and I'm the President of Coastal First Nations and also the elected Chief Councillor for Haida Nation. And Coastal First Nations is an alliance of coastal communities from the North, Central, and Haida Gwaii. And today we're joined with our leadership from our communities. We're also supported by the First Nations Leadership Council. We want to acknowledge FNLC for their support and also acknowledge the beautiful territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations and allowing us to do this important work here today on their traditional territories. And I want to welcome all of you for being here today. When people think about beautiful British Columbia, they think about our coast. They think about our territories, our people, and our culture. They think about the whales and the salmon and the spirit bears that live here. Our nations have stewarded and cared for this area, our home, for 14,000 years. And it remains one of the richest and most productive ecoregions on Earth. reflecting on the words of a Helsik elder who also provided testimony at the 1977 West Coast Oil Ports Inquiry that was held in Namu. Angus Campbell said, "An oil spill would finish us." We want to continue to live our way of life connected to a healthy, intact ocean. We will never stop fighting to preserve our cultural and our spiritual way of life and the coastal wildlife and ecosystems that we depend on. That is why we are here today with the province of British Columbia to call on the federal government to commit to upholding the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act to protect our ecosystems and to grow our coastal economy for the benefit of all British Columbians and for all Canadians from coast to coast to coast. The oil tanker ban is a result of 50 years of advocacy by our coastal communities, and it is foundational for keeping our coast healthy and our economy strong. For the past 25 years, Coastal First Nations Great Bear Initiative has been focused on building a sustainable conservation economy. This economy was built in partnership with the province and federal governments, and it has been incredibly successful. New data provided by Coast Funds confirms that in 16 years, the conservation economy fueled by the Great Bear Rainforest Agreements has created over 1,000 permanent jobs and over 100 new businesses, all while protecting the environment. Building on our success, just last June, we signed the Great Bear Sea Project Finance for Permanence agreements with the federal and provincial governments, which has the potential to triple these numbers. But we can only realize these benefits if we keep our coasts healthy and productive. This is what we're focused on, and this is what we want to keep building on our coast. That is why today we are proud to stand with the province of British Columbia, united in our shared responsibility to protect Canada's North Coast. We stand together in calling upon the Government of Canada to uphold and defend the oil tanker moratorium. Lax Kw'alaams, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Slett. I'd now like to introduce and welcome to the podium Garry Reece, the Mayor of Lax Kw'alaams.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. I come from a community that is one of the largest communities in BC. We have over 4,200 members in our band. You know, we're already rich with all our sea resources that we have in our area. We have salmon, all the sea resources. My people still go out today to get those sea resources and the salmon. Our fishermen go out every year for our people. We have a fish plant in our community. We spent millions to upgrade that to a ground fish facility that employs up to 100 of our members every year. That is the largest employment we have in our community for our people. We want this tanker ban to stay in place. We cannot afford to let this happen, to try to lift that tanker ban. We've seen what an oil spill can do up in Alaska. Today, they still have the effects of that spill. Another oil spill was in the Helsik there when they had an oil spill, and we all see what that can do. That'll destroy all our sea resources that our people today depend on. And we cannot afford to let that happen. My people will never, ever agree to allow oil in our territory. We have lots going on in our territory. We're involved with a lot, but we sure don't need that oil, which can destroy everything in our territory. And I'm really happy to see all the First Nations and the province, the Premier here today, supporting that to have that tanker ban stay in place. And we want to see it stay in place all the time, forever. We don't want to ever see that in our territory. And we will go against it all the time. So thank you with that.
Thank you, Mayor Reece. I'd now like to welcome to the podium Garry Reece, Jason Alsop, the President of the Council of the Haida Nation.
Hawa Tamara. Seeing Ait Law, Dalong Wad Luchan. Good morning, everybody. Hawa for joining us today. Hawa to the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people for allowing us to do business here today. Gagwis Hanudiki Gaga. My name is Gagwis. I'm the elected president of the Haida Nation, and it's a real honor to be here today with the province and the Coastal First Nations Alliance, all of our First Nations leadership here. And I'm here today as the president of the Haida Nation to make very clear on behalf of the Haida Nation, the Council of the Haida Nation, our Hereditary Chiefs Council, Skidegate Band Council, Old Masset Village Council, all the communities and people of Haida Gwaii, to make very clear that there's absolutely no support for pipelines to the Northwest Coast or oil tankers in the waters around Haida Gwaii. The people of Haida Gwaii, all the people who call the islands home, have spoken together with one resounding voice in solidarity with BC and the Coastal First Nations in calling on the Government of Canada to continue to defend and uphold the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act. And we must continue to work together to care for this very important part of the world for the long term, to think multi-generational and not short term, but also working together as people, as governments, as communities to think creatively, to think innovatively in ways that we can support the overall well-being of all people in our society. Haida Gwaii and the surrounding waters are our home. This is our home. This is the place that we come from. Our ancestors, our origin stories tell us that we come from the ocean and that the bounty of the sea is what sustains us, has shaped who we are, and essential to our entire culture and identity and our way of being. For those who don't know, Haida Gwaii is an archipelago, and it's made up of over 150 islands with over 5,000 kilometers of shoreline. So just to put that in some perspective, that's as close to driving from Vancouver to Montreal. So that's the area we're talking about when we're looking at protecting our coasts and our shorelines and the ecosystem. And this extensive shoreline is the ecosystem at risk with bringing oil to the coast, the risk of an oil spill. And as others have mentioned, there is no technology or way to clean up that crude oil, that bitumen. And it's important that we consider the interconnectedness of all things, of the ecosystem, of the seabirds, the killer whales, the sea mammals, the salmon, which we all depend upon, the seals, the halibut, the seaweed, the Dungeness crab, all of our favorite foods, prawns. It's what everybody's seeking in the world. And if any of you have had a taste of any of that fresh out of the ocean, you would know why this is so important to us and why it's worth standing up for. So all of these life forms are at risk, and the entire food web with the risk of an oil spill. We must recognize the interconnectedness of people, all the beings, the land, and our own well-being as people and communities. It's also important to recognize that our ecosystems already face a lot of pressure, and we are supporting the global economy through the fisheries, through accommodating shipping traffic for the global economy. There's extensive marine traffic already around Haida Gwaii and Haida waters in the Northwest Coast. A recent study by Clear Seas Center for Responsible Shipping found that there will be a 217% increase in shipping between Canada and Asia, which would go from an average of 529 vessels to 1,676 vessels per year by 2040. And that's with approved projects already. So we're already accommodating this global trade and this global economy and bearing a lot of those risks already. The narrative around the benefits of pipelines and oil is based on short-term thinking, and we've experienced the impacts of short-term thinking in our territories. And they center around this discussion around putting food on our table. You got to put food on the table. Well, with our land and our ocean, it's what literally is the food on our table. This is literally what we're talking about here, is our sustenance, our self-sufficiency, our ability to be healthy. And it's key to our survival as a people, as a culture, and as a value to all of us. So we're committed to long-term sustainable economies that respect this fact. And we're choosing to invest in the health of our lands and the health of our waters for the benefits of current and future generations, to protect the supernatural coast for the benefit of all people. So how everyone for listening today.
Hawagagwis. I'd now like to welcome and introduce Paula Amos from Indigenous Tourism B.C.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Tamara. My name is Paula Amos. I'm here with Indigenous Tourism B.C, but I'm also from Nuchanath, from Heshkwit, which is on the west coast of Vancouver Island, and I'm also from Squamish Nation. So I'm really honored to be here and stand with coastal First Nations and the province and the First Nations leaders here. This is a really, really important message that we are bringing to the federal government about the ban. So with Indigenous Tourism BC, today we're talking about our economy, our coast. This is our home, the coasts. And this is where we've lived for thousands and thousands of years. And we're looking at new ways to build economies, and Indigenous tourism is one of those new economies. I come from a long fishing family, so I've fished up and down this coast, and we know how rich it is and how much we need this, the ocean and the foods that it brings to our people. But we're also looking at how do we build economies. Indigenous tourism, we've been around for about 28 years, and it's one of the fastest growing tourism sectors in all of BC and the rest of Canada. The coast is where people really want to visit. It's been growing for the last 20 years, and we know it's a place when visitors want to come here, they want to see supernatural British Columbia. They come here to see the oceans, but they also want to see the whales, the bears. This is the first time that they might have ever seen the whales and the bears, and this is what they come here. But they also want to experience our cultures and our foods, so we need to make sure that we keep the coasts clean, and we can welcome visitors for many more generations. When I talk about, I'm from Nuchanath, and I grew up fishing on the west coast of Vancouver Island, up and down the coast. So I know these beautiful territories. So I want to make sure that we're able to have this moratorium continue on. And I'm really honored to be asked to come here and speak. So I will keep it short and sweet because so many of the other speakers have said some good words. Kleko.
Thank you, Paula. I'm now honored to introduce and welcome Hereditary Elder Clarence Innis.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge Musqueams, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh for allowing us to come onto their lands to do some important work. My name is Kaket. I am one of the Samoyeds of Gitxaala from the Gishpatwada clan. I am with you this morning representing the hereditary leadership of Gitxaala Nation. Gitxaala Nation, for those of you who might not know also that Gidlachmon is one of our languages, which translates as people of the saltwater. Gitxaala territory, our home, has been in the heart of discussions around crude oil for decades, and most recently the Enbridge Northern Gateway project. During that time, our community and our leaders said no to that project. This was based on the strength of our laws, our Adao, Ayao, and Guilhians. This decision came after considerable work on the risk of oil. Our community and our leadership determined that there was no tolerance for risk of oil that oil brings. Gitxaala people always say that when the tide is out, the table is set. We could not take the risk of polluting our territories, the impacts to our resource and our way of life. Gitxaala Nation fought hard to have their decision recognized first in court and then working with the Crown. Our nation continues to grow our community and serve our people on our terms and under our laws. We cannot do this if we are forced to continue to fight against oil projects. This was the promise and the commitment of the moratorium. This ban let us focus on our way of life for our future generations so that they will always know what it is to be Gitxaala. I am pleased to stand with these leaders and reaffirm Gitxaala's support for tanker ban and remind people listening of the history that the tanker ban did not stop oil on the North Coast. Our laws and the strength of our people did. Thank you.
Thank you, Elder Clarence. I would like to thank all the speakers that spoke this morning. The message is clear. Our coast is not for sale. We have shown through Coastal First Nations and the province of British Columbia what it means to stand shoulder to shoulder, build an economy and jobs while still protecting the environment and working with communities. And that's what we're going to continue to do. I'd like to now invite Premier David Eby back to the podium.
Thanks, Tamara. Before we get to Q&A, I'd like to invite all the signatories up to sign the North Coast Protection Declaration. I think through this process, we discovered that Chief Slett has the coolest signature.
Absolutely. Before we start the QA, we're going to take a big group photo, and then we'll get to questions.
Okay, out front of the podium here.
Everyone say salmon.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us here today at the Vancouver Convention Center. We're going to take questions from the media now, and we're going to start on the phone lines. For all media on the phone lines, please press *1 to enter the queue, and all members of the media will have one question and one follow-up. We're going to start with Justine Hunter from the Globe and Mail. Go ahead, Justine.
Thanks so much. I'd like to start with Gagwas and Chief Slett. I'm wondering if you could each answer briefly. What happens to your tolerance for LNG tanker traffic if the federal government scraps the tanker ban?
How Justine? Well, we're here today to, align on our collective interest to protect the coast from bitumen and oil tankers and an oil pipeline, and focus on our aligned interests in that area. But I think, part of this work is looking at the overall cumulative impacts as well of all shipping, and continuing to work government to government to government to make sure that we're all looking at the long-term planning and the serious risks to our ecosystems as a whole. We all stand behind healthy coasts and wild salmon and supporting killer whale populations and economy. And we do need to look seriously together at, what are the long-term plans? How are we going to ensure that we are protecting the coast from the risks of any ships going aground from the current traffic? So, the Haida Nation is quite concerned about the overall shipping impacts, but we're prepared to work with all governments to find alignment of how we can continue to do better in protecting the coast as a whole. Hawa.
Thank you.
Gayaxika, Justine. Oh, sorry. I'm here with some of my leadership from the Haida Nation, and we had an oil spill not that long ago, and in 2016, and we're still feeling the effects of that oil spill in our territory. It happened in one of the most productive areas that our people would harvest in. They would harvest all of our traditional foods, and this area has never fully recovered, and this is some of the work that we continue to do as a nation. So when we stand here today to call on the Government of Canada and to continue to uphold the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act, we know fully the effects of what an oil spill can do to the ocean, to our breadbasket, to our way of life. In terms of LNG, we do a lot of work collectively as Coastal First Nations, monitoring the impacts of LNG. We work together with the province and in other instances other governments, Canada, on our concerns. We'll always monitor what happens in our territories. But today we are here to affirm our position on the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act and see that it remains intact and in place so it can do the things that we wanted it to do with that protection of our healthy ocean and, keep it productive. Kayaksika.
Justine, do you have a follow-up?
I do, and thank you for those answers. Premier Eby, I'd like to ask you, you talked today about this being a region that's too precious to put at risk. At the same time, your government is okay with this plan to allow fully laden Aframax tankers through the South Coast. And I'm just wondering if you can help me understand the difference between these two regions for you.
Thanks, Justine. I think, one of the things that I hear from the chiefs, from Chief Slett, from Garry Reece, is an apprehension about anything that puts the coast at risk and the need for us as a provincial government to work closely with coastal First Nation leaders to mitigate those risks. When I talk about the crisis and the challenge facing our country in building an economy that can stand on its own 2 feet, the need to diversify markets, this calls for and will require an expansion of shipping to Asia across the Pacific. That brings with it a responsibility and obligation on the provincial and federal governments to work with these coastal First Nations leaders to mitigate any harms to the coast and to ensure we're protecting these spaces for future generations. It leads to work like the Great Bear Sea agreements that we are entering into with them. It leads to work like the Great Bear Rainforest agreements that we're entering into, finding that balance that works for a sustainable and durable support for the work that we have to do as a country. And I'm very grateful to these leaders for working with us to find that path forward for their communities as well as for all Canadians together, including their communities. This is a challenging and important piece of work that we're doing together. In the south, in the harbour that you can see behind me, we work closely with the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh on any economic development proposals, including the publicly funded, publicly owned pipeline that was built over the objections of those nations and the provincial government. It's built now. It's publicly owned. For some reason, even though it's not at capacity, even though there is expansion that could be done, the discussion is focused on removing the oil tanker ban in the North Coast. The same North Coast where fully 40% of the projects in the Major Projects Office of the federal government, the same region where all those projects are located, that depends on the support and acceptance of the leaders behind me. That's my frustration about the discussion that's been happening nationally, is that in a bid for wedge politics in a troubled time next door in Alberta, the discussion has been focused on a consensus that has existed for 50 years, that there not be oil tankers off the North Coast. Instead of focusing on what we can do together in areas where we've already reached an outcome in terms of taxpayers spending almost $20 billion on a pipeline and owning a pipeline that nobody wants to buy from us and isn't even at capacity. So that's the piece that we see, and that's the work that we see ahead. And so we're trying to navigate those waters with our neighbors while recognizing our obligation to protect our coast. Protecting the North Coast isn't, and the oil tanker ban isn't a cost to the economy. It actually is a protection and expansion of our economy. And we have the numbers to demonstrate that. And I'm grateful to the Coastal First Nations for their work in compiling that information. Those thousands of jobs, that billions of dollars in economic activity, that Dungeness crab on your table, or that salmon that you're enjoying for dinner, that halibut that you're eating, guess where it comes from? it comes from that north coast. That is major economic activity for BC. It's tourism, it's sustainability, and it's uniquely Canadian.
Next, we'll head to Sorry, thanks, Justine. Next, we'll head to Katie DeRosa from the CBC.
Premier, is this declaration because you have an indication that Prime Minister Mark Carney is looking to repeal the tanker ban? Do you worry that he's under pressure from the Alberta's premier? Like, how likely is it that the tanker ban could be lifted?
Well, we can't allow the small minority of voices that are driving wedge politics in Alberta to drive the national conversation about what is a uniquely Canadian economy. What does a Canadian economy where we're standing on our own 2 feet, what does that look like? This declaration is not a reaction to Alberta. This is a restatement of a consensus that has existed for 50 years along the North Coast between governments of multiple stripes and coastal First Nations at the federal and provincial level. We are confirming our direction, our shared direction to grow our economy by protecting our coast, and that we have absolutely zero desire to enter into a conversation that puts the massive economic work that has been done at risk through an oil tanker spill that will be impossible to clean up. And so confirming that we're all still in line, that we all still support it, and that this is not a partisan issue. This is a ban that has existed between Conservative and Liberal governments federally, between Conservative and NDP governments provincially, and among many changes of leadership among the coastal First Nations. We're all still on the same page, on the same place. We grow our economy by protecting our coast.
Katie, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, it seems like there are some First Nations on the pipeline route that are in favor of it and feel like it would be an important economic opportunity for their nations, especially if there was a co-ownership agreement. So how do you balance the various positions among Indigenous leaders across BC?
Well, I'll point out what is obvious to me and has yet to fully sink in for some individuals, which is that there is no pipeline project across the north. There is no route. There is no proponent. There is no financing. Simply because the Premier of Alberta would like to get rid of the oil tanker ban on the north coast does not mean that anybody wants to build this pipeline. It would cost $40 to $50 billion. It would require navigating a consensus at the provincial and coastal First Nations level that has a different approach to growing our economy by developing our coast. And so I'll be blunt, I don't see any prospect of a pipeline unless it is fully taxpayer funded and the federal government forces it through over provincial and Indigenous objections. And I mean, if we've got $40 or $50 billion to spend on economic development in Canada, when we already have a publicly funded taxpayer-owned pipeline that isn't even at capacity and could be expanded, like, how does that make any sense to anybody? So it's really difficult for me to shadow box with a non-existent project that has non-existent benefits because it will never be built and it's not going to happen. I have to deal with the real. And in British Columbia, we're dealing with the real growth of our economy. We talk about the billions of dollars in economic activity up and down the coast through fisheries and tourism. We talk about the major projects that are at least tolerated at the current moment by coastal First Nations leaders and endorsed and supported by other Indigenous leaders that will drive the Canadian economy, create tens of thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in economic activity from private sector proponents, real projects with real companies, including the largest company in BC history to locate in our province, Anglo Tech. This is where we are in BC. We're on the reality-based economic plane. What will really create jobs? What will really raise the federal and provincial GDP? What will really help us pay for the public services that we all rely on? And how can we get there as a province together, First Nations leaders, people in every corner of the province working together That's where we're operating. We're not operating in wedge politics world. We're operating in the real world here.
Thanks, Katie. Next, we'll head to Alec Lazenby from the Vancouver Sun.
Hi, Premier. Just shifting gears slightly, I wanted to ask about the federal budget that was tabled yesterday. There's a $2 billion wealth fund for critical minerals. There's tax write-off for LNG, Filipino Cultural Center. Just wanted to get your thoughts on what you saw in the budget yesterday in terms of its relation to BC.
There are some really positive pieces of news for British Columbians and Canadians in the federal budget in terms of what I've been talking about, which is the tens of billions of dollars of investment that is reaching final investment decision in our province that's going to create prosperity in every corner of this province and jobs and employment for people, and will assist us in pivoting our national economy at a time when it's under direct threat from Donald Trump, including our softwood industry. I'm really heartened to see things like the and it sounds a bit technical, but the income tax credit for intra-provincial transmission lines, it's like, roll your eyes. But this is the North Coast transmission line that will enable us to bring to reality about 10,000 jobs in the northwest corner of our province alone. Just that one initiative really assists us on that. There are some pieces I was looking for that I didn't see. You know, I didn't see the Massey Tunnel. I'm sure many British Columbians did a Control F to try to find those words in the budget. Hopefully, it's hidden in one of the line items under infrastructure. You know, we're very keen to see additional forestry supports here in BC. Lots of forestry families across the province are counting on the commitments that were made at the Softwood Summit just a couple days ago that we had here. Obviously too tight to the budget to be reflected there, but we're looking for that from the federal government. So there's work for us to do with the feds, but there were some very positive pieces, I think, for our province. We also ultimately want to see that North Coast transmission line move into the Major Projects Office to enable that mining activity in Tahltan, Cascadene, and Taka River Tlingit territory in the Northwest.
Alec, you have a follow-up?
Yes, I did. Another piece of the budget is that the federal government is signaling that the emissions cap for oil and gas might be as good as gone. Just your response to that in terms of, I guess, the province scrapping that and what it means for the country's, you know, action on climate change moving forward.
Yeah, well, obviously things are evolving at the federal level in terms of their approach to carbon pollution. We're going to follow closely what their plans are and respond accordingly. We're doing our own review provincially about how we ensure our Clean BC program responds to today's realities, the challenges and opportunities that are ahead of British Columbia. We're expecting that review to be coming forward soon, and the results of that review will inform our provincial decisions about how to move forward.
Thanks, Alec. Next, we'll head to Ashley Joannou from the Canadian Press.
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to touch on Katie's earlier question for some clarity. Can you tell me, Mr. Premier, have you actually spoken to federal officials or the Prime Minister about maintaining the tanker ban, and what specifically have you been told?
Yes, we have underlined in multiple meetings with ministers and with the Prime Minister that we believe that the oil tanker ban is foundational and critical catalyst for economic activity in British Columbia and the nation, that it is the signature item, the key that will unlock tens of thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in economic activity, both through coastal First Nations initiatives and the initiatives of communities, companies, and nations across the province of British Columbia. There's no way for us to make it any clearer to the federal government. They are very aware. The message that we're sending today is we ask that they affirm their continued support for the tanker ban going forward. What I've heard the federal government say is that they will not advance projects over the objections of the provincial governments or First Nations through the Major Projects Office or otherwise. And I think it's pretty clear today that there is no support for lifting that tanker ban in the province of British Columbia.
Ashley, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah. Has the government started at least thinking about any sort of contingency plan or what you would do if the tanker ban was lifted?
You know, I am an optimist in this situation, but an optimist that likes a belt and suspenders. Practical optimist, I guess I'll say. This affirmation of our continued support for the tanker ban is a message to the federal government that we are united, that there is no change in position here. It is the same as it has been for half a century, and it will continue for half a century more because our coast is too precious and the economic activity there too important to put at risk for a non-existent project. We are really clear about that, and the reason why I don't think the tanker ban will ultimately be lifted is because with time it's becoming increasingly clear that there is no oil pipeline project that exists in the real world in Canada, but there are major projects that are supported or tolerated by coastal First Nations that we are all working on together that requires the tanker ban as the social license to be able to do that work.
Thank you, Ashley. Next, we'll head to Coritain Mitin from Radio Canada.
Morning, Premier. Would you say there is a consensus among First Nations leaders all across the province to support the all tanker ban? And in other words, are you hoping that more First Nation leaders, maybe those whose territory is not on the coast, will sign this declaration?
Thanks. I won't speak for Indigenous leadership, but what I will say is that for the nations who are directly affected by the proposal to lift the tanker ban, you see them standing in unity behind me. I'll turn it over to Chief Slett to speak on behalf of the Coastal First Nations.
Thank you. We're here today as Coastal First Nations together to uphold the tanker ban. We also have support, with other First Nations that also know the importance of the reliance of having a safe and healthy ocean for our ecosystems, for our way of life. Recently, there was a resolution of support from the Union of BC Indian Chiefs that supported the tanker ban, and we are very grateful for that support from other communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Slett, and thank you everyone for joining us today. That's all the time we have today.